Hollywood's golden age glittered like champagne, and sometimes exploded like it too. From a yacht mystery to a superhero's very mortal end, these are 10 actor stories so wild, tragic, or strange that people still whisper them today. Thanksgiving weekend, 1981. Catalina Island is quiet, black water rolling against the hull of the Splendour. On board are Natalie Wood, her husband Robert Wagner, and her Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken. The evening is a cocktail of camaraderie and friction, dinner ashore, drinks, and a return to the yacht where stories diverge. There are raised voices, there's a dinghy that will later be found adrift, there's a timeline that seems to reset every time a witness revisits it. Sometime after midnight, Wood disappears. Hours later, she's found floating face down in a red jacket. The initial ruling calls it an accidental drowning. Years later, the death certificate is amended to drowning and other undetermined factors, citing bruising and unanswered questions about when she left the boat and why. Investigators reopen interviews. Some details clarify, others don't. Each pass through the story rearranges the same puzzle pieces into a new, equally plausible picture. As a child on the Green Promise, a stunt bridge collapsed under Natalie during a take. She was injured and developed a lifelong fear of dark water, an eerie echo of how she would later die. Her mother allegedly urged her to keep working despite the trauma, feeding the stage mother legend that shadows Wood's biography. Wood wasn't merely famous, she was familiar. America watched her grow from Miracle on 34th Street to Rebel Without a Cause, to adult roles that revealed a flintier, subtler performer. She had that rare alchemy of star power and approachability. A death at sea, romantic in fiction, merciless in fact, clashed with the sense that this was a person the audience had known since childhood. The abruptness of it made the glamour look flimsy, like a set wall you could push over. There's the amended cause of death. There are bruises and a drifting dinghy. There's the captain's evolving account. There's the awkward geometry of Wagner, Walken, and Wood on a small boat and a long night. True crime culture turns the case into an episodic ritual. Reconstructions, interviews, maps of two harbors. One camp says the evidence supports a tragic accident and warns against retrofitting suspicion to grief. Another says the unanswered questions are the point. Meanwhile, the ethics of posthumous investigation hover over every new documentary. When does seeking truth become a cottage industry? Because it's intimate and unknowable at once. A yacht you can picture, a marriage you think you understand, and an ocean that doesn't explain itself. Every few years, a new definitive account arrives. Catalina stays silent. If that left you uneasy, the next one made America lift its foot off the gas. Fast. September 30th, 1955. James Dean aims his silver Porsche 550 Spyder, Little Bastard, toward a Salinas race. He's already myth in motion, a new kind of movie star, all nerve endings and silence. Near the Cholame Junction, a Ford Tudor turns across the highway. The Spyder, low and fast, collides at an angle that freezes the future. Dean is pronounced dead that evening, 24 years old. The wreck is salvaged and scattered. Stories attached to the parts like burrs, a mishap in a shop, a crash on a track, a display that doesn't behave. Whether those anecdotes are embroidered or accurate, the result is the same. The Porsche becomes a reliquary for a secular saint, and the word curse sticks to metal. Hours before the crash, Dean was ticketed for speeding on the way north. And the night before, actor Alec Guinness reportedly warned him, after seeing the Porsche, that he'd be dead within a week if he drove it. Guinness later retold the moment, forever welding prophecy to the legend. Dean didn't just act youth, he diagrammed it. With only 3 major films, he locked in an entire posture toward adulthood. Wary, wounded, allergic to phoniness. When the crash came, it didn't only end a career, it snapped a live wire that the culture had just discovered. Dean became forever not just young, but unfinished. The renaming of a junction, the roadside tributes, the annual pilgrimages, they're less about grief and more about ritual maintenance of a mood. The debate cycles like clockwork. How fast was he going? Was he at fault? Does the curse belong to folklore or to a statistical cluster amplified by attention? Car historians chase chassis numbers, safety advocates point to the story's utility, fans keep a candle lit for a hypothetical filmography that never happened. What's unusual here is how myth and fact fuse so quickly that prying them apart misses the point. The tale of the crash is part of the crash's cultural footprint. Why it endures. Because Dean is the patron saint of unrealized potential, and America is fluent in roadside shrines, the jacket, the posture, the eyes. They idle forever, key in the ignition. Quick pit stop. If Golden Age chaos is your thing, tap subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss the next rabbit holes. From a cursed sports car to an infamous crash that sparked a safety overhaul nickname, let's talk Mansfield. June 29th, 1967. Pre-dawn humidity outside New Orleans. A Buick Electra. A cloud of insect spray fog that shrinks visibility. A tractor-trailer ahead. The Buick underrides the trailer, shearing the familiar rhythm of cause and effect. Mansfield, her driver, and her attorney die. Her children, sleeping in the back, survive. Within hours, a myth takes the wheel. Decapitation. Coroner reports will correct it, but lurid rumors have deeper roots. Over the years, the crash has become a talking point in the evolution of rear underride guards. Those steel bars meant to stop cars from submarining under trailers. Whether the collision accelerated policy or merely galvanized public understanding is debated. The nickname Mansfield Bar becomes a macabre shorthand that the public actually recognizes. Her 1963 comedy Promises, Promises, and an accompanying Playboy pictorial triggered obscenity bans and protests, making Mansfield one of the first major U.S. stars to face mainstream fallout for on-screen nudity. The controversy supercharged her too hot for the censors image, priming the public's fixation well before 1967. Mansfield was both a bombshell and a satirist, a performer who wove self-parody into the product. She was marketed in neon, she behaved like she could read the room. The brutality of the crash, industrial, unglamorous, instantaneous, shredded the soft-focus bubble many had kept her in. She went from billboard to case study in physics of impact. Safety is a machine that lurches. Tragedy, advocacy, engineering, regulation, then repetition. The Mansfield story endures as a hinge that the public understands without a textbook. Truckers and mechanics might use the nickname casually. Writers debate the fairness of tying a person's name to a device. But the guard itself is tangible. You can point to it in a parking lot. Few Hollywood stories leave behind hardware. Because it's a rare crossover between celebrity culture and road design, the myth gets corrected, the shorthand remains, and the lesson that glamour folds under physics does not fade. Swap twisted metal for twisted politics. Bogart versus Washington and the headline that wouldn't die. In late 1947, a cluster of Hollywood names coalesced as the Committee for the First Amendment to push back on HUAC's Hollywood hearings. Bogart, already the screen's emblem of principled stubbornness, joins the flight to Washington, speaks up, and lends his brand to a message. Fear is not a policy. Then comes spring 1948, and a photoplay piece titled, "I'm No Communist," widely read as a retreat. The article threads a needle between ideals and realities, distancing him from the Hollywood 10, while insisting he'd gone to Washington in good faith. Audiences, studios, and historians proceed to argue about that needle for the next 7 decades. Bogart's persona was granite. On-screen, he refused easy compromises. Off-screen, he faced a machinery designed to extract them. The Red Scare era ran Hollywood on double pressure. Political theater on one side, studio economics on the other. Seeing Bogart navigate that squeeze punctured the fantasy that movie heroes could remain myth in the face of subpoenas. Did stagecraft dupe him in DC? Did studios threaten his oxygen supply? Was he pragmatic, calculating? Both? The archival record supports multiple readings, which is why every serious blacklist retrospective relitigates the same paragraphs. Bogart remained politically outspoken in other contexts, which muddies any neat narrative of capitulation. The piece endures not because it proves anything, but because it fossilizes the compromise problem in 900 words.
Bogart's hard-drinking, chain-smoking image caught up with him. He died of esophageal cancer in 1957 at 57. During the African Queen shoot, lore says Bogart and John Huston dodged the local water and dysentery by drinking whiskey, while Katharine Hepburn got sick. Apocryphal or not, the story is so Bogart it practically smokes. Because it's the petri dish for image versus institution. America loves its marble statues, until a gale hits. In that moment, Bogart blinked. So would most of us.
From a hard-boiled hero under fire to a superhero with a very mortal mystery.
June 1959. George Reeves, TV Superman, Saturday morning invincibility personified, is found dead in his Benedict Canyon home of a gunshot wound. The ruling is suicide. The narrative, however, refuses to sit still. Party guests recall timelines that don't quite align. Questions pop about residue, angles, and household dynamics. None of it adds up to a courtroom reversal, but all of it adds up to a cultural itch the audience keeps scratching. Decades later, people still argue about whether the official story fits the evidence or merely the era's appetite for a quick conclusion. To children, Reeves wasn't just playing a hero. He was performing certainty in a country that craved it. Losing that figure to an adult world death tore the cape off the illusion that television could protect us from randomness. It was an early lesson in parasocial grief, the ache you feel for someone you never met, whose character you loved. Two interpretive lanes emerged and never merged. One accepts the official determination, pointing to context, depressive symptoms, and the hazards of retroforensics. The other keeps poking at the weird seams. A bullet here, a statement there, arguing that unanswered questions are smoke from an unacknowledged fire. Books and films keep the discussion oxygenated, less for the sake of a gotcha than as a meditation on how we handle ambiguity around our icons. Reeves had a years-long relationship with Toni Mannix, the wife of MGM fixer Eddie Mannix, an entanglement that later fed darker theories about his death and added a studio-power dimension to the speculation. Whether or not those theories hold water, the triangle keeps the case in the culture's conspiracy orbit. Because the S is a promise, and Reeves's end insists that promises are theater, not contracts. Mystery sustains. Nostalgia invites repeat viewings. Caped legends to cabinet folders, Lancaster under the government's microscope. From the late 1940s into the 1960s, the FBI maintained files on numerous public figures, Lancaster among them, tracking associations, rumors, and political activity. In public, Lancaster's voice only grew louder. Films that leaned into conscience, statements that risked heat, and most memorably, his presence at the March on Washington in 1963. The contradiction is cinematic. A man projected 10 feet tall by a studio system, and at the same time reduced to a dossier number in someone's drawer. In 1990, Lancaster suffered a major stroke that left him partially paralyzed and with impaired speech. He lived 4 more years but never fully recovered, a stark bookend for a performer famed for physical grace and a ringing voice. Lancaster radiated autonomy. Circus acrobat turned star, physically and morally athletic. To learn that the government watched him the way studios micromanaged him reframes the golden age as something more like a gilded cage. It also ties Hollywood history to American civic history in a way fans can feel in their bones. FOIA-era releases flesh out the surveillance climate. Thresholds for suspicion that seem absurd now, bureaucratic incentives that rewarded volume over precision, and a culture that confused dissent with danger. Lancaster's willingness to speak, on civil rights, on power, kept him in the crosshairs. Biographies paint a portrait of a man trying to live out loud in an age that preferred its actors on mute between takes.
Because it punctures nostalgia without invalidating it, the photos from the Lincoln Memorial still inspire. The file folders still chill. Together, they tell the truth. From surveillance to stigma, one revelation that forced Hollywood to face a crisis.
In July 1985, Rock Hudson publicly confirmed he had AIDS. Overnight, an epidemic that the mainstream had othered becomes unavoidable on breakfast table TV. The announcement isn't a PSA. It's a human being the culture already loves, confronting it with reality. By October, he is gone at 59, but the months in between yank the conversation from euphemism into eye contact. Friends and co-stars step up with public affection. Fundraisers swell. Denial gets harder to perform.
Hudson's brief 1955 marriage to Phyllis Gates is widely viewed as a studio-managed union to protect his image. After his 1985 announcement, former partner Mark Christian sued the estate for emotional distress related to HIV exposure and won significant damages. Another chapter where public and private collided in court. Hudson wasn't indie. He was the template for mid-century straight romance masculinity. The gulf between that image and the disease the era stigmatized made the cognitive dissonance impossible to ignore. For many Americans who'd never learned beyond scare headlines, Hudson's face became a bridge. Tabloids were predictably cruel. Activists were predictably heroic. The medical establishment and the media learned in public, imperfectly and too slowly. Long afterward, documentaries and essays reframed Hudson's role, not canonizing him, but acknowledging that visibility can be world-bending even when it isn't volunteered for activism. He didn't set out to be a symbol. That's what makes the symbol potent. Because the story of AIDS in America is incomplete without the moment a matinee idol said, in effect, "Look at me, then look again." It didn't fix everything, but it did change something. Then a different kind of power play. Studios, lawsuits, and a wild 1951 survival tale for dessert. After a 13-year relationship ended, Sondra Locke sued Clint Eastwood in 1989. A 1990 settlement includes a Warner Brothers development directing deal. Years later, amid fresh litigation, Eastwood acknowledges he quietly reimbursed Warner for the $1.5 million arrangement. Locke alleges the opportunity was a paper door, dozens of pitches, 0 green lights. A fraud suit follows. A separate action against Warner sees key claims revived on appeal. Eventually, settlements close the book, but not the debate. Long before all that, in 1951, a Navy flight ditched off Point Reyes. Eastwood and the pilot swam through the cold Pacific to shore. He later said the ordeal taught him a calm under-pressure mindset he carried into directing, most notably on Sully. Eastwood's screen ethic, spare, principled, unbending, meets the messy politics of studio gates and relationship fallout. The survival story, meanwhile, plays like a myth origin, a man associated with stoicism learning it first in the ocean. Was the Warner deal genuine discretion or bad faith window dressing? It depends on which filings you believe and how you define opportunity. Either way, the case previewed later industry-wide conversations about leverage, access, retaliation, and the quiet accounting behind overall deals. The survival tale endures as a humanizing counterweight to the legalese, a reminder that biographies contain multitudes. Because power is a better villain than any movie heavy, and because cliffhangers outside a screenplay feel more like truth. From courtroom intrigue to a private icon's haunting final chapter in Santa Fe. February 2025, Santa Fe. Authorities determine Betsy Arakawa likely dies first of hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. Days later, Gene Hackman dies of heart disease while living with advanced Alzheimer's. Investigators piece together a timeline with pacemaker data and domestic details. Methodical, unsensational, devastating. No foul play, no twist ending, just the quiet math of time passing in a house the public rarely saw. Hackman's screen presence was competence incarnate. Men who solved problems, took control, got results. The manner of his passing cut against that aura, not as a contradiction, but as a reminder. Command is a performance. Mortality is not. Fans who'd grown used to his decade-long privacy felt the shock, double loss, and the realization of how little they knew. In 2012, Hackman, already retired, was struck by a pickup truck while cycling in the Florida Keys. He was hospitalized and recovered, but the incident previewed the frailty that would haunt fans when the Santa Fe timeline emerged. There's no scandal, just unease. A rare disease in headlines, a staggered timeline that reads like a gothic short story written by a cardiologist, and the modern fight over how much the public should see. Some records are sealed, explainers proliferate, tributes read like neighbors leaving notes on a fence. The conversation shifts from curiosity to care. What dignity looks like for icons after the cameras stop. Because audiences trusted Hackman, and trust makes grief feel personal. The story lingers in the mundane details, a quiet room, a calendar, and a pacemaker log. And finally, a legend whose family tragedy still echoes through Hollywood history. May 1990, Mulholland Drive. Inside Marlon Brando's home, his son Christian shoots Dag Drollet, the boyfriend of Brando's daughter Cheyenne. Courtroom coverage becomes a daily weather report. Christian pleads to voluntary manslaughter and serves time. Cheyenne, grief-stricken, struggling with mental health, dies by suicide in 1995. Brando, long allergic to fame's carnival, recedes further. The house that symbolized modern Hollywood royalty becomes a synonym for its darkest annex, celebrity intersecting with family catastrophe. Brando didn't just act differently. He taught the culture to watch differently. He's foundational in American screen acting, both before and after. To see his surname welded to headlines about a killing inside the home felt like a monument catching fire. It wasn't a metaphor for Hollywood. It was painful, with a proper noun attached. At the 1973 Oscars, Brando refused the Best Actor award for The Godfather, sending activist Sacheen Littlefeather to protest Hollywood's portrayal of Native Americans. The gesture, unprecedented on that stage, sparked outrage and decades of debate over activism, authenticity, and how the industry handles dissent. Arguments spiral around culpability, mitigation, and the gravity well of Brando's myth. Could a fair jury even exist inside that legend? Documentaries keep revisiting the timeline. Interview fragments recirculate. The family tries to live beyond a case file that refuses to close in the public mind. The louder the noise, the quieter Brando himself became, his late career public appearances edged with retreat. Because it collapses the polite space we keep between screen legend and human catastrophe, then refuses to reopen it. Which story shocked you the most, and which one should we dig into next? Drop it below, and I'll pull the case file.